would like to say during this time, we should be coming together as a collective, and there will be no judgment upon any nation. We're going to be uplifting each other. Times will not be hard anymore.
Again.
You're a freak.
Buckeye police telling us this is a domestic violence incident involving 3 generations of women from the same family. We've learned the grandmother shot her granddaughter while her mother was also.
It started with a phone call. A desperate grandmother, her voice shaking, reporting a violent fight inside her home. On the other end of the line, dispatchers could hear chaos, shouting, the thud of a struggle, and then silence. Seconds later, a single gunshot split the air. When officers arrived, they didn't find a stranger, an intruder, or a career criminal. They found 3 generations of women, and one of them was lying on the floor, her life slipping away. The shooter, the very woman who had called for help. But this wasn't just a sudden burst of rage. It was the deadly climax of years of buried tension, unspoken pain, and one shocking discovery that, according to police, may have pushed a grandmother over the edge. Welcome. Before we begin, hit subscribe to Untold Crime Chronicles, because the story you're about to hear is one you will never forget. On the afternoon of December 15, 2024, in the quiet, family-friendly city of Buckeye, Arizona, a 911 dispatcher answered a call from a woman in her 70s whose trembling voice revealed urgency and fear. She reported a violent altercation unfolding between her daughter and granddaughter inside their single-story home. The commotion behind her growing louder with each passing second until the phone line was suddenly interrupted by silence. And then, in a chilling moment that would mark the city's first homicide of the year, a single gunshot cracked through the air, setting into motion a chain of events that would shock the entire community as police units sped toward the address. The influencer's life. The victim was identified as 31-year-old Laria Kia Elliott, a Detroit-born woman who had moved to Arizona as a child and grew up surrounded by the strong personalities of the women who raised her. She was magnetic.
I would like to say during this time, we should be coming together as a collective, and there will be no judgment upon any nation. We're going to be uplifting each other. Times will not be hard anymore.
Ambitious and deeply creative. A woman whose charisma radiated both in person and online, where she had cultivated a TikTok following of over 20,000 people through a mix of humor, unfiltered self-expression, and heartfelt conversations about healing, relationships, and the Black woman's experience. She was also a former caregiver, preschool teacher, mental health counselor, and corrections officer who brought the same authenticity to her jobs as she did to her social media. And in recent months, she had been on the brink of transforming her digital presence into a thriving full-time career while developing her own jewelry line, DIY clothing brand, and podcast concept. 3 generations under one roof. Inside the Buckeye residence, 3 generations of women shared not only a roof, but also the complex weight of their intertwined histories. Deborah, the grandmother in her 70s, carried the traditions, burdens, and physical challenges of age. Tanisha, Laria's mother, worked tirelessly to maintain the household's stability while navigating her own role as a daughter and a parent. And Laria herself, fiercely independent yet deeply tied to family, pushed to carve her own path while still contending with the expectations and opinions of the 2 women who had shaped her life. While there were moments of unity, celebrations, and public displays of love, there was also an undercurrent of generational tension, emotional strain, and unresolved disagreements that could turn the home from a place of comfort into a pressure cooker where small sparks could ignite into raging conflict in an instant. Sunday, December 15, 2024, began like any other in the Buckeye household, but at some point that afternoon, An argument erupted between Laria and her mother, Tanisha. The precise trigger remains unknown. Perhaps it was about money, stress, or long-held grievances, but what matters is how quickly it spiraled into a heated confrontation that drew in Deborah, who was watching from another room. Sensing the escalation, Deborah picked up the phone and dialed 911. But before dispatchers could finish gathering details, Laria entered her grandmother's bedroom, allegedly trying to take the phone, and according to police documents, struck Deborah in the head and shoulder. In the chaos, Tanisha rushed in, grabbing her daughter by the hair in an attempt to separate them, the struggle turning violent as mother and daughter fell to the floor at the foot of the bed, while Deborah, caught between fear and anger, reached for her 9mm handgun and pulled the trigger, the bullet striking Laria in the back and dropping her just outside the bedroom door. At approximately 4:13 p.m., the sound of that gunshot was captured on the open 911 line, prompting a rapid police response. Within minutes, Buckeye officers arrived at the single-story home near 354th Drive and Maricopa Road, issuing commands over loudspeakers for the occupants to exit. Tanisha emerged first, hands raised, visibly shaken, and was detained without incident. Inside, officers found Laria lying unresponsive in the hallway, a single gunshot wound to her back, and despite first responders' attempts to save her on the front lawn, she was pronounced dead at the scene. Nearby, Deborah sat calmly in another room, compliant and unresisting, with the 9mm handgun, the weapon that ballistics would later confirm as the one used. Resting close by, the tragedy sealed in a matter of minutes. Detectives moved swiftly, collecting statements from both surviving women, securing the weapon, and reviewing the partially recorded 911 call that had captured not only the chaos before the shooting, but also the sudden silence afterward. In her interview, Deborah admitted to intentionally firing the shot, claiming she feared the fight between Tanisha and Laria would spiral further out of control. Yet she also told investigators she never believed her granddaughter intended to kill or seriously injure her mother, a statement that prosecutors would later view as critical. Evidence confirmed the shot had been fired at close range, the firearm was legally owned, and Deborah's only reported injuries were bruises to her head and shoulder. Outside, shocked neighbors spoke of hearing shouting, but assumed it was a typical family dispute, never imagining it would end in deadly violence. Within 48 hours, prosecutors from the Maricopa County Attorney's Office charged Deborah Green Davis with second-degree murder.
Breaking news out of the West Valley in a shocking case of domestic violence. A grandmother accused of shooting and killing her own granddaughter. Police say it happened this afternoon about 4 p.m. in Buckeye near Baseline and Miller. When officers got there, they found a woman in her 30s who'd been shot. And right now, police have arrested a woman in her 70s. They say she's the victim's grandmother.
And during her first court appearance, she arrived in a wheelchair, quiet and composed, as the judge set her bond at $500,000. Prosecutors emphasized that despite the emotional nature of the family dispute, Deborah had made a conscious decision to use lethal force even after admitting she did not perceive an imminent threat to Tanisha's life.
Still an active scene with investigators going in and out of a house that's behind this mobile command unit. You can see they have that mobile command unit blocking the street now, but earlier this afternoon, emergency vehicles filled this neighborhood. Buckeye police telling us this is a domestic violence incident involving 3 generations of women from the same family.
The rare and deeply unsettling image of a grandmother facing decades in prison for killing her granddaughter left the courtroom and the wider community grappling with the question of how a family conflict could descend to such an irreversible end. The tension in the house had been simmering for weeks. Every word became an argument, every glance a silent accusation. The grandmother's once soft eyes had hardened into something cold and sharp, and the girl who used to feel safe within those walls now felt trapped in a cage. She could not escape. The breaking point came on a night thick with heat and silence, when the air itself seemed to choke her when she dared to speak her truth, the truth about the secrets she had carried for far too long. The grandmother's voice cracked with rage. She swore the girl was ungrateful. She swore she had sacrificed everything for her. But beneath the shouting, there was something else. Something darker. A decision already made. It was supposed to be just another evening. But the air was charged with an invisible electricity.
It's very difficult to speculate at this time about what exactly led up to the shooting. Investigators are here. They're going to be gathering statements, talking to the family members, the surviving family members in this incident to determine what happened. They're gathering evidence here at the scene, and they're going to need some time and the community's patience to really figure out all of those details.
The girl stood by the doorway clutching her phone. Her last lifeline. Her voice shook as she told her friend she couldn't take it anymore, that something bad was about to happen. But her friend on the other end didn't know those words would be the last she'd ever hear. The grandmother moved closer, her footsteps slow, deliberate. The girl's heart pounded so loud she thought the whole street could hear it. She whispered one last prayer, one last plea for peace, but instead the reply was a deafening crack that split the night in two.
A quiet neighborhood, but honestly, I didn't think things happened like that, so I really am very not happy with this.
Yeah, especially at Christmas. It's got to be hard for everybody.
The gunshot echoed like thunder rolling through the quiet neighborhood. Lights flicked on. Doors opened, but no one reached her in time. The smoke curled in the air, carrying with it the finality of what had just happened. The grandmother stood frozen, the gun heavy in her trembling hand, her face a storm of anger, regret, and something far more haunting. The girl lay still, her phone beside her, the screen still glowing with the unanswered call. And in that moment, the walls of the house seemed to close in, swallowing the truth before anyone could speak it aloud. But the truth has a way of bleeding through walls, of finding its way into whispers, and eventually into the world where no one could ignore it.